Good morning, students. As you all know, today we have done one class in the morning, okay, where we have started the new chapter, that is how do organisms reproduce, okay. So in this chapter, basically we are going to discuss about what is reproduction, why reproduction is important, and the different kinds or types of reproduction or modes of reproduction which we can see in living organisms, okay. So to begin with, let's first start with the definition of reproduction. As you have already studied this chapter in your lower classes, you have already gone through the process of reproduction in class 7 and 8. So you must be well aware of this definition. Reproduction means it is basically a biological process in which an organism gives rise to young ones similar to itself. My dear students, whenever you are reading or memorizing the definition of reproduction, one thing which you should remember when you are by hearting the answer of the definition of reproduction, the first thing which you should remember is this last terms, similar to itself, okay. So reproduction is when an organism is giving rise to a new one, when an organism is giving birth or it is forming a new individual, but that organism is of its similar type, okay. A part of the body, a part of its specialized organs are involved in this process. Since it is a biological process, means it is happening in the body of that particular organism, and in that body of the particular organism, some of the parts are getting involved in this process, and by this process a new organism is formed, and that organism is of its own kind, okay. For example, a cow will give rise to a calf, okay. A cow will give rise to a cow, a goat will give rise to a goat, okay. Human beings will give rise to another human being, so they are similar to itself. A mango tree will again give rise to a mango tree only. From the seeds of the mango we will again be able to get a mango tree, okay. So in plants, animals, lower organism, wherever the process of reproduction is occurring, in that process the new one, the young ones are similar to them, okay, those who are giving birth. Next we will move on to the significance. Students, in your previous chapter you have studied life processes, control and coordination. Now in the first chapter, in life process, you have gone through topics like nutrition, you have gone through topics or processes like respiration, excretion, circulation. So as I told you, when I was teaching that topics, when I was teaching that biological process, I told you those processes are known as life processes. Why they are known as life process? Because the survival of the individual is impossible without those processes. No one can survive without nutrients, okay. So for that, nutrition is important. If we do not take oxygen, we will die, so respiration is important. If we don't remove the toxics and waste from the body, we will die, so excretion is important. If the hormones and enzymes and oxygen and nutrients are not circulated in the body where they are needed, we will die. So all these processes were life processes because our survival is dependent on them. Reproduction, though an important part of our lives, reproduction is very important process in our lives, but still reproduction is not a life process. One individual can survive without reproducing, okay. They will not die, okay. If a cow is not being able to reproduce, that cow will not die, okay. If a human being is not able to reproduce, that human being will not die. So reproduction is important, although it's a very important process, but it is not a life process. So you should remember this thing. Next we have the significance. Now when I'm talking about the significance actually refers to the importance of the process of reproduction. Why reproduction is important? So the first point is maintaining the existence of species on the earth. So please try to understand what I'm trying to say here. When an individual is reproducing, the first thing is happening is increasing the population, okay. I hope you know this. When one organism is dividing or multiplying, when an organism is reproducing, they are increasing in number. This increasing in number is helping it to strengthen its species. It is helping it to survive on the earth. Why? Because there is a huge amount of, or you can say there is a lot of competition on earth. Why? For survival, for food, for shelter, for reproduction. Okay, if you, for example, let me tell you, if there is a plant, this plant can be eaten by a deer, this plant can be eaten by a goat, this plant of, if I talk about the wild forest, this plant can be eaten by a bear also, it can be eaten by a elephant also. So all these animals will be competing for the same plant. Okay, so to compete they need to increase in number, because you know, when there is any kind of issue or problems happening in our life, we always try to find someone who is going to help us, isn't it? If we are alone, we are weak, but if we are in group, we are strong. So the first significance is increasing the population of the species, and this increase in number will help in maintaining the existence of the species. When a species is greater in number, when there are lots of individuals in that particular species, okay, then it will help it to survive on the earth easily in groups. For example, you know that honeybees, ants, termites, they are colony animals. Why they are colony animals? Because they are very small in size. Bees are very small in size. Okay, ants are very small in size, but when they come in a group, they become strong. Okay, when they are in a group, they can fetch food for them. When they are in a group, they can find a shelter for them. So this crowd of bees and animals, their group helps them to survive on the earth. Okay, now next point is maintaining the existence. Why I am saying this? Because one species is dependent on the other species. You have already studied about food chain in your lower classes. You know, suppose if there is a grass, that grass is eaten by the grasshopper. Grasshopper is again then eaten by the frog. The frog is then eaten by the snake. So in this way, there is a chain which is known as the food chain that exists in nature, isn't it? Now these food chain will get hampered. Okay, the balance between the food chain will get hampered if any one of the species gets reduced in number or increased in number. So to maintain that ecological balance so that everyone can survive, the reproduction process is important. Last point is evolution. Now what is evolution? By transmitting favorable variations from one generation to another generation. Students, this is very important point. Okay, I will give you a simple example. You know, you all have siblings. Most of you have siblings. You have brothers and sisters. Your parents are same. That is, all your brothers and sisters have same father, same mother. But all of you are different from each other, isn't it? It's not that you are exact copy of your brother or your sister is your exact copy. Plus, you will observe that the qualities in you and your brothers and sisters are different. Maybe you are good in sports, but your brother and sister may be good in painting or any other activity. So here you will find the difference. Okay, so evolution is a gradual change. Okay, evolution is a gradual change that can be seen, and that change is seen. Why? Because of the favorable variation which is passed from generation to generation. And when I am saying that something is passed from one generation to another generation, there is only one way to pass that quality, and that is by reproduction. Okay, you can say, suppose if I continue with the same example, if your mother is a good singer, her quality can be given to you. You can get the quality of good singing, good voice only through the process of reproduction. Since you are his or her daughter or child, that's why you are getting that quality. That's why they say that these are genetic. These qualities are genetic. Her father was a good painter. That's why she is a good painter. Her father was a good sports person. That's why he is a good sports person. So these kind of qualities are passed from generation to generation, and these variations, these qualities, it is important to be passed. These favorable variations should be passed. That is the reason that the human being who are present today on the earth, who are ruling this entire earth, are the most advanced one. If you talk about the earlier human beings who first came on this earth, they were more like chimpanzees, apes, gorillas. Okay, that is the reason they say that we have ancestors. Monkeys are our ancestors. We have evolved from the monkeys. Why? Because the first human beings, they didn't even know how to walk on two legs. They used to use all their four limbs to walk. So the difference between that human being and today's human being is huge, and that huge difference is known as evolution. That gradual change did not happen only in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. There were lakhs and lakhs of years that passed by to see this huge change. Okay, it was a very slow process. It was not a sudden process, but a constant gradual change, and this gradual change were brought about by the transmission of favorable variations from one generation to another. So these are the significance of reproduction. These are the reasons why reproduction process is important. Next, we will move on to the types of reproduction. So you all know, basically, as I told you, that reproduction is a biological process. Biological process means it is occurring in living organism. If it is occurring in living organism, that means any part of their body is involved. And the part of the body that is involved in reproduction are known as basically the sexual parts. Okay, sexual parts, or you can say gonads and gametes. We will talk about it later in this chapter in details, and also you are aware of it since you have studied this chapter in your lower classes. So the type of reproduction in which the sexual parts are not involved, that is known as asexual reproduction. The type of reproduction where the sexual parts are involved, the gonads and gametes are involved, that is known as sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is usually seen in the lower organisms, the simpler ones, where the differentiation of male and female is not found. Okay, also asexual reproduction can be seen in plants, though they have their sexual parts. Sexual reproduction is usually found in the complex organisms, in higher animals who have complex body system, and also in plants through flowers. Now first we will go through the difference between asexual and sexual reproduction. Okay, you already know it. Asexual reproduction is a faster process. Since it's a simple process, it is a faster process. Sexual reproduction, on the contrary, is a slower process, as it is a complex process. Asexual reproduction, as I told you, the sexual parts are not involved, the gametes are not involved, so only one parent is needed. That's why it is known as uniparental process. The sexual process, on the contrary, is a biparental process, because both the male and female, or you can say the father and mother, are involved in this process. Offsprings which are found in case of asexual, or formed in case of asexual process, are identical. Identical means Rox copy, because they will get all the qualities and characters of the single parent. So there is no variation. But in case of sexual reproduction, the offsprings that are formed are not identical. That is the reason that you and your brothers and sisters are different. Whereas in sexual reproduction, variation is visible. As I told you, this is the reason your brothers and sisters are different from you, though you have both same father and same mother. Okay. Now moving on to the next topic, we will talk about the different modes, the different common modes of asexual reproduction. As I told you, asexual reproduction is a kind of reproduction where the sexual parts are not involved, and these are all usually seen in the lower organisms, the unicellular organisms, or you can say lower multicellular organisms, where the differentiation of male and female are usually not found. The common modes are fission, budding, fragmentation, regeneration, spore formation, and vegetative propagation in plants. Okay, vegetative propagation in plants involves the process where, except the flower, which is the sexual part, okay, except the flower, the other parts like roots, stem, leaves, they are involved, they participate to give rise to a new plant. So first we will talk about the fission process. As you can see, okay, now I am moving on to the book. I will show you the process. Fission. When I am saying fission, fission basically means splitting or breaking. Okay. So fission is breaking into two. So these are usually found in unicellular organisms. In the unicellular organism, in this kind of reproduction, the parent cell, which is also known as the mother cell, okay, because it's usually the mother who gives rise to the individuals or the new organisms. So the mother cell, it splits into two or more than two identical individuals. Okay, if the number of individuals which are formed are 2, then it is known as binary fission. Binary means 2, fission means to break. Okay, and if the number of individuals which are formed are more than 2, then it is multiple fission. So let's first talk about the binary fission, the first type of fission. In binary fission, which is usually seen in amoeba, paramecium, euglena, leishmania, okay, these are unicellular organisms. Here what happens is that first of all there is an invagination, okay, invagination or constriction, which is written over here. A constriction is seen and the nucleus, it gets elongated and starts breaking. Okay, the elongation and breaking of nucleus is known as karyokinesis. You have already studied the chapter said in class 9. You know karyo means nucleus, kinesis means to break. So karyokinesis means breaking of the nucleus. So nucleus basically elongates and divides into 2, and finally when the nucleus is divided, why we need the nucleus to divide first? Because we know that nucleus contains chromosome, and chromosome contains all the genes and qualities of the parents. Okay, so then finally the cell is broken into 2 daughter cells. Okay, here also in paramecium you can see the nuclei. Paramecium contains 2 nucleuses, that's why nuclei is written over here. The nuclei, they are getting elongated and divided, and then finally the cytoplasm is dividing. When the cytoplasm divides, it is known as cytokinesis. Cyto means cytoplasm or cell, and kinesis means to break. Okay, similarly here in bacteria also you can see the binary fission. I hope it's clear. First of all, the cell wall, there is the cell wall, then the cell is elongating, the inside parts are getting divided, and finally the 2 daughter cells are formed. So when there is 2 daughter cell formed, okay, when the breaking occurs and after the breaking there are 2 daughter cell formed, it is known as binary fission. But in some organisms, okay, like plasmodium, okay, like in plasmodium which is the causative agent of malaria. Okay, you are well aware of this disease because this is one of the very common communicable disease spread by mosquito. So in case of plasmodium, what happens is the nucleus, okay, the nucleus, it starts dividing rapidly, and after dividing, what happens is this cell, the nucleus along with the cell, it starts dividing. Okay, and when it divides, it forms a external cyst like covering. Okay, it's a protective wall. This is not the cell wall, I'm telling you. The parent cell, it starts dividing continuously, and when the parent cell is dividing into daughter cells, they start developing, they form a cyst, a protective wall around them. Okay, and finally the entire protective wall, the cyst, is filled with multiple number of daughter cells, and when this cyst gets filled with the daughter cells, the daughter cells, they come out by the rupturing of the cyst wall, okay, cystic wall. So the in multiple fission from one parent cell, you will find multiple number of daughter cells. That's why it is known as multiple fission. You must know that in some case of, in some animals, okay, like in amoeba, for example, in amoeba, during favorable condition, they go through binary fission, but during the unfavorable condition, this same amoeba, it undergoes multiple fissions. Okay, so they also show multiple fissions in stressful conditions, amoeba and paramecium, but in favorable condition, they do the binary fission. Next we have is budding. Now what is budding? This is also a kind of asexual reproduction, okay, which is seen in yeast and hydra and all. What happens is, on the external surface of the mother cell or the parent cell, you will find a small bud growing on it. Okay, now this bud, after taking nutrients from the mother body and after acquiring a proper growth, it gets nipped off. Okay, nipped off means it gets detached from the mother cell. Okay, this is known as budding. But in some cases of yeast, you will find that the daughter cell still remains attached to the mother body, and it also starts dividing when it is still attached to the mother's body. Okay, so you will find 2 kinds of budding in case of yeast. But if we see in hydra also you will find the budding process, where you will see that at first a small outgrowth, a bud can be seen. This bud takes food and nutrients from the mother body and acquires a proper size, and after growing to a certain amount it gets cut or detached or nipped from the mother's body and start living as an individual organism, okay, living organism. So one thing which you should see is, in case of fission, when we were studying about fission, multiple fission or binary fission, here you can see that the parent cell divides completely to form the new daughter cell, whether it is 2 in number or more than 2 in number. But the parent cell loses its identity, okay? But in case of budding, the parent cell is still there, okay? The parents are still alive. The parent cell, the mother cell is still present over there. It does not lose its identity, and again a new organism is formed, okay? Next we will study about is spore formation. This spore formation is one of the important, you can say, process of reproduction in fungus, okay? As you all know, fungus is a completely different group, okay? It is saprophytic in nature. They feed on the dead organic matter. In case of fungus, you will find huge number of spores forming, okay? These spores can be zoospores, okay, zoospores which have flagella and can move. They can be planospores, or they can be a special kind of exospores which are known as conidia. So there are different kind of spores that can be seen in the fungus. But what is the main thing which you should know? The spore formation, as you can see, is kind of similar to the multiple fission process. As I told you, in case of multiple fission, okay, a cyst is formed. A cyst is formed in which the daughter cells divide, okay, in which the mother cell divide and form the daughter cells. Here also you will find a structure which bears the spore. I am just encircling the part. This is known as sporangium or the spore mother cell. So this is the part where the spores will be formed. When this sporangium is completely filled with the spores, this bursts from a corner and these spores are then released in nature. And these spores then develop the young mycelium and survive as a separate fungus. Okay. So this is the process of spore formation. How sporulation occur? I am repeating again. There is a spore mother cell where the spores, okay, the spores of the fungus, they divide and divide and divide, and finally when the sporangium is completely filled up, the spores are released, which again develop into a new fungus. Okay. Then we have regeneration process. Now what is regeneration? Regeneration is the ability of the living organism to repair themselves or restore their body parts lost in an accident or self-amputation, which is also known as autonomy. Now there is also fragmentation. Now my dear students, I want you to go through these two processes and listen to me. Both in regeneration and fragmentation, regeneration is usually seen in hydra and planaria. Fragmentation can be seen in simple algae like Spirogyra and all. So here in fragmentation, what happens? A huge fragment is broken into 2 or 3 pieces, and then all these pieces, or you can say each of these pieces, they develop into a new individual. Even in case of regeneration, you can see a single planaria is divided into 2 or 3 segments, cut into pieces, and they then again form the lost part. But there is a difference between regeneration and fragmentation. Fragmentation is basically a process of reproduction, okay? It is a process of reproduction because here the main aim of the organism is to reproduce. They divide into fragments, and from where they develop a new individual. But regeneration basically is the ability of a living organism to again reform the lost part. So it is basically not a complete, or you can say a proper type of reproduction, because in regeneration they regenerate the lost part. Now that is a different thing, that in some organism they can regenerate the entire organism, okay? So that's why you will find that regeneration is of 2 types. It can be partial, it can be complete. Like in planaria, the regeneration is complete, the entire organism will be formed. But in case of lizard, if you see the lizard can just regenerate the tail part. So in lizards, the regeneration process is incomplete process, okay? So students, this was all about the reproduction, asexual reproduction in lower organisms. In the next class, I will continue from the asexual reproduction in plants, where we will discuss about the vegetative propagation Okay, I hope I have explained all the points clearly. Go through the video and we will discuss the problems related to it in the next class. Thank you.